Coming up on the payoff, Clint is a guy who has always had what I've wanted. Now, what does that mean? That means for me, when I walked into the rooms of 12-step recovery, I guess my first meeting was 2002, where I met Clint. It took me 10 years to get 1 year, do the math on that. But from that moment on, where a guy like this comes into your life, he starts to say things that you carry with you forever. Sometimes forever is outside the walls of sobriety and getting drunk, but you hear these positive voices still kind of moving you back towards a solution. Lucky for me, I made it back so I could hear more of Clint, and his message is outstanding. His son was actually, we'll say, featured on this podcast. He was one of our first guests. His son is Tim Brooks, and Tim has an amazing story. Got in big time trouble with the law, has turned it around, and what he's doing in the world of sobriety and recovery is unbelievable. And of course, Clint, his father, was along for the ride, the good and the bad, and we get into all of that today. Another thing we talk about, which I always get wound up or have trouble getting my head around, is the fact that, your feelings, and Clint says this, your feelings are like the weather, right? If you're an alcoholic, you can't control them, and they're going to change. And there's things like that you hear time and time again in this podcast that I think will help you get a lot out of it. All right, but before we get to our man Clint, Kevin Souza. Yeah, this is the first, I haven't even had both of my brothers on. So this is the first. We had Timmy on early on, and now having Clint on. You guys are the first two family members.
Wow. Well, we could keep going with my family.
Mine too. We're not finished yet. Now, Allison, say hello.
Hi.
That's Allison. She's going to be, she's our producer for today, but it's just going to be, how it goes.
Hey,
I'll give like an intro, and then you and I will just go into it. So if you're ready to get going, we can start.
Yeah, whatever you want, dude. You run the show.
All right. So, you've been a part of my life for a long time. Back to the first crack I took at getting sober was in 2002, and you were one of the guys who. How much? What's your sobriety date, Clint?
93. No, 11/13/93.
So you had about 9 years then, and you were just living the sermon. I mean, I'm sure you could say it differently, but to me, it looked like, wow, here's a guy. You had a lot of stuff to say. It was a attraction, right? Not promotion, and it was really cool to hear what you had to say. And then when I finally got it per se, and I came back around, you were there again with a lot more time. And you've had a great influence on me, and I know a lot of other people who I respect. So it's great to have you here.
Well, what I remember most is just liking you instantly and hoping that you'd have the life you have today. And I remember, as you know, we keep track of people when you don't see them for a while. And I remember somebody, I can't remember who it was, but somebody told me you were out doing some more research and just, said a lot of prayers your way, and just so delighted you're back in my life, and just no regrets, right?
Yeah, and that's the thing. It's like, but God willing, some people, and we see it today, like don't make it back alive.
It's different. It's definitely different. I think the game right now is just keep people. You can't get sober if you're dead, right? We just got to keep people alive. The stuff that people are messing with is different. Yeah,
it is different.
It's horrifying. I mean, I certainly had buddies die, but it was always, it was never an overdose. It was car accidents or, doing something super risky while hammered. And it just, that feels different than somebody dying because they were trying to catch a buzz and some dealer put some junk in it that wasn't ever supposed to be in it. That's the stuff that I can never get my head around it.
How involved are you?
Real.
Yeah, it is real. How involved are you in the recovery community aside from, you're just being an active participant within the 12-step community with AA and stuff?
I live it, man. And I think the longer I've been around, the more it's just become, my life's gotten a little smaller related to it. I used to do a lot of other volunteerism that was outside of AA and rehabs and things like that. And I just, about a decade ago, I got to a place where it was like, hey, this is something that I'm passionate about. I understand, I live, and I put all my time that's not family and work and recreational into it. So I'm on the boards of some rehabs, and as you know from Timmy, helping him with what he's trying to do, which to me is just magical, and just
what's the name of that place again? It's
called Synergy Houses. So
yeah.
He came to me and a couple other guys in my
Timmy, of course, for those who don't know, is your son.
Yeah, and it's cool. You know, I got a guy I sponsor is on the board with us, an investor, and he looked at the whole kind of recovery industry and saw in the structured sober living place that there was room for improvement. There was a lot of people trying it, a lot of people with great intentions, and a lot of facilities that people went to that really needed help that weren't delivering on what he was promising. I think there's some gems out there, but you know, I think he's trying to figure out a way to create communities where, you know, the norm is that people thrive and find the life you and I have, as opposed to the rarity.
Yeah.
And you know, and kicked it off right in the middle of a pandemic, right?
Yeah.
Communal living was not ideal. So you know, big part of that, both just kind of strategically and financially, as far as, you know, buying properties that you can bring residents in, and also connected with a lot of the guys that are in it and who have now become part of my life. And you know, it's been an awesome thing to do with Timmy as well.
A lot of those guys are winners.
Know, yeah, I mean, just great. Now, everybody, right? Everybody's a good guy. It's just we got sideways in life.
Yeah, upside down, right? I mean, it's so. Let's get into your story a little bit. You remember your
Sure.
first? You remember your first drink? You remember or taking drugs? How old were you? Paint the picture.
Yeah, no, vividly. Like summer before 10th grade year, and you know, I was a guy that had exposure to this through some family, and wasn't. You know, I would say the week before I drank for the first time, I would have comfortably said I was never going to drink. Just one day it seemed like a good idea. I went after it, and the next day I was never not going to do it. And I drank and did drugs on the same night, both for the first time. Like my first buzz was, turns out if your first buzz was that big, you end up chasing it for the rest of your life.
Yeah.
Which is what I did.
Yeah.
And it just was like, I went from literally scared of it to fully committed, sacrifice all the opportunity I had in my life to maintain it. And, you know, started and was on paper, looked like what they teach you in schools, right? That they teach parents in schools, like grades dropped, you know, activities that I was way into became less important. Just instantly began to struggle, and then put up a really good facade, right? Like just a gift of gab and tried to convince people everything was fine when it clearly wasn't.
Yeah, the shell game starts early.
Yeah, totally. And you know, I was super lucky, right? Like born in a place that I didn't deserve to get born into, with access to great education and cool things, and never wanted anything really. And part of that came with parents that, you know, put people in my life, teachers and coaches, and who saw me for who I was and tried to influence me, and I couldn't hear it, and I rejected them and got resentful about it, and bitter, and I look back now, and fortunately some of them I've been able to cycle back to, and, you know, honestly thank them for trying to teach me to be a human, and I wasn't old enough or mature enough to get it or see it, but I'm super grateful they tried.
How much different did your attitude get when you started to drink? You know, because you said comfortably a week before, you said you wouldn't have never drank. You could have said that.
Yeah, I mean, I was, gosh, it was relief. It wasn't like I was a happy kid who had life figured out. Alcohol, and I'm a guy who believes it doesn't really matter, right? Alcohol, you can smoke it, you can chew it, you can snort it. For me, it was booze. I tried a lot of the other stuff, but the thing I loved was booze, and it just made life easy in a way that I'd never experienced before, and there was no part of it that was social. From day one, I was drinking alone, hanging out, didn't care, like was happy if you wanted to join me, but was happy if you didn't.
Yeah, and that's a early sign, right? I mean, the same thing for me. I remember when I figured out that I could drink by myself and have just as much fun or more than I did with other people, and this was in high school, and I thought I'd really discovered something.
High school too. Yeah, I was in a boarding school with I would take cases of beer and put a tapestry over it so it looked like a trunk, and it was just a coffee table. And before dinner I'd crack a couple of Budweisers and by myself with a big smile on my face, and and then it's like cocktails before dinner alone, and in frickin' 11th grade in high school.
Where did you grow up? Where was your family based out of? Where did they grow up?
So I grew up in the northern suburbs of Baltimore, and then ended up going away to a boarding school that I had a long family history that had gone to that was super academic and elite in every way, and it was a privilege to get there. And I, one of my many regrets in life is I didn't take advantage of it as I should. I spent a lot of time and energy trying to get by and get away with stuff as opposed to maximize the opportunity. But cool people, and still in touch with some great people there, and it's an unbelievable experience.
What was that like?
It was super, in many ways, really healthy for me to kind of get away from home and get independent. And I'm a guy who believes I was born an alcoholic, so there's no part of me that thinks my life would have turned out differently given different circumstances. It just doesn't make any other. I got it in my gene pool. I went after it right away. I don't think some other situation in my life would have made it so that I could have successfully handled the stuff.
Yeah, I'm the same exact way. I feel like I was just predisposed to it. It's in my family. I believe that once I started to drink, I just know it changed me so much. That there was no turning back. You're at boarding school. Was it difficult to drink? And were you just drinking at boarding school, or were there drugs involved too?
Well, there was. I mean, it's in that environment in many ways. This is the '80s, right? So it was. It's often easier to smoke pot because it's easier to. They had school rules and expulsion and all that kind of stuff, and I triggered a bunch of them. I barely got out. And the day I graduated, I slept through breakfast with my parents. I go to baccalaureate service, and they're sitting in the front row, and I'm 20 minutes late. I have to walk all the way up in front of everybody, and they by 3:00 that afternoon, all my buddies were jumping in cars and going off to somebody's beach house to have senior week, and my parents are like, "So you're going to go to Outward Bound and Hurricane Island? That's our graduation present to you." And I was like, "Okay, cool, great. So I'm gonna go down to the shore and we got a party." And they're like, "No, you're like, we're leaving right now."
So was that an effort by them?
Right?
Yeah.
They saw it and they were trying, and so they and awesome experience. Really glad I did it. Right.
What exactly is that? Because I've always heard that people, you heard that somebody would get sent to Outward Bound or would go to Outward Bound, but it wasn't rehab.
No, God, no. There's no access to drugs or drinking, and they kind of fool you a little bit, right? Like they tell you when you're packing your bag, don't bring any money. You're going to be in the woods. Why would you bring money? And then, the next thing you know, you're carrying a canoe down Old Town, Maine, and wishing you had $5 in your pocket just to get an ice cream cone,
Yeah.
right? Much less a pack of cigarettes or some beer or whatever. So, they have different length excursions. It's a very awesome program. I'd recommend it for anybody.
Okay.
It's outdoor oriented, it's group oriented. The trip I was on was young males and females, and they intentionally drive you to a physical and mental breaking point at some point in the trip, and then you get a lot of group feedback as to what it feels like to be on the other end of it when you hit your breaking point. And so you learn a lot.
Oh, that's pretty awesome.
And in a cool environment, and soloing and starvation and physical extremity and lack of sleep, and the best case scenario is you hate it when you're on it and you really appreciate it when it's over.
Yeah, for sure. And you get to know a lot about yourself, and it's although you guys separated, that's quite the team building experience.
Pete, I had a moment with the counselor who, she summed me up. I mean, the woman had known me for 12 days, and she took me aside and she said, "You're a just enougher. And the problem with you is you have the ability to be a leader, and you lead people into just a nothing. And you're never going to succeed in life until you figure that out." I mean, and that was the verbatim quote, and I was 18 years old.
Now, you're a smart guy. Were you like, shit, I'm found out?
Totally.
Yeah.
Totally.
Yeah.
I mean, I was just like, she just, like, if anything, I felt bad that I couldn't fake it better than 2 weeks.
Yeah.
And then I was that broken guy who was intent on proving her wrong, but not by becoming not a just enougher, but by proving her that just enough would be
okay. Would be enough.
Yeah. I missed the second half of her statement, which is, it's not the way to live life. I tried to validate that you could succeed that way.
Yeah, I mean, it's funny, and I still learn today. You take shortcuts, you're going to feel like shit. That's my experience with it.
Yeah, and I mean, I think this woman's point, and certainly true to many things in my life, it's not only that, it's that I was spending so much time and energy intentionally trying to do things differently than just following good advice and direction, right? It's one of the biggest thing I learned in the program is just that the value of somebody else's experience and applying it to my life and the wisdom, and just it gets easier.
Following directions.
It gets easier. It's just unbelievable, right?
Yeah.
And I couldn't do it. I was just like, there was something about me where you said black, and I wanted to tell you why white was better.
So you get done with this Outward Bound, and then do you go back home to the Baltimore area and party before you go to school? Where did you go to school?
So I went to a school called Hotchkiss, and then I went off to the University of Vermont.
Okay.
And and I worked. I wasn't just a playboy. And I worked hard. I had jobs, baling hay and stuff like that for the summer. But they were always in like really cool environments. In many ways.
But your parents were kind of determined to teach you a work ethic, in a sense.
Oh, yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, there's nothing that I did to myself that I could look back on and point my finger at my parents and say, I mean, I tried, right?
Yeah.
That was part of the like pig pen, create a dust ball, and it's everybody else's fault. But no, it was, good people trying really hard, doing stuff like, hey, let's put them in the woods and give them that experience and come back in life. And I had moments of being really motivated and intent on it, and then just, couldn't add alcohol, and all the best intentions seemed like a bad idea.
Did you ever try to stop, like when you were in college? Was there ever when did the light bulb go off in your brain?
So my freshman year got really dark. I failed miserably at college, and part of it was I just drank and partied. I smoked a lot of pot. I was in a triple, and all three, none of us got ass back.
Oh.
I mean, we just took it and if I had to own taking those two guys down, I probably should. Right? I wouldn't point my finger at them. We were just none of us were healthy for each other. But I would have to say I was the instigator, and I had some really dark moments. Right? I knew I was failing. I was keeping it to myself. I wasn't reaching out for help on any level, and
and you're kind of just stuffing it, right?
Totally.
Yeah.
And really dark, like moments of my parents sent my older brother to pick me up from college, and he showed up, and I told him I was expelled, and I don't really remember the conversation, but I was kind of like, I think you better drive, meaning like, that edge of the cliff might look pretty good. You don't want to be in the car with me. I was terrified to come back and tell my parents who had, spent a lot of money to make sure that I had a really good education, and I just majored in hanging out and walking around.
So you get home and what happens?
I went to my first, my dad was awesome, and my parents were like great at major disasters, not so great at like, how come you didn't clean up your room or make your bed?
Of course, right?
Great at being balanced in the midst of a crisis, and so it's not like they're screaming or yelling or anything. It was just hey, this isn't. Dad's super logical guy, and I went to my first AA meeting. It was May of 1985.
And what happened? Did it? What was the impact it had on you?
So I got sober. For, there was no part of me that didn't buy in right away. There was no part of me that my parents arranged for me to go and work for a sober woman in northern Canada for the summer as a job and take care of her. She had a bad back. And the requirement that she put on me was that I had to go to an AA meeting every day. And we were in rural northern Canada in a cabin in a lake. And, that meant, on Sundays, the meeting was right in town and I could get there in a boat. And on Wednesdays, it was a boat and a 100-mile car ride.
Wow.
Like it was, there was a meeting every day, but it wasn't dirt roads and it was the same 12 people, just one day a week. It was closer to somebody else.
Yeah. You're not hopping on a Zoom, that's for sure.
Yeah, totally. And it was a really cool experience. And I remember it being really good. And then one day it seemed like a really good idea to buy a bottle and drink. And
were you still up in Canada?
Yeah. This woman kicked me out. She caught me like right away. And she told me, I came home with tail between my legs, and I think I pretended to go to meetings for like another month, and then my dad sat me down, and this was another like massively profound moment in my life. My dad sat me down and said, what are you doing? And I was like, I'm good. Gave him some line. I got meetings on tape. I listened to in the car.
Yeah.
She's like, that isn't the way this thing works.
Yeah.
And then he said the thing that just made all the difference, not that moment, but later in my life. He said, I said to him, I was like, Dad, I really think it was the Coke in the pot, and I'm 19 years old, and I've never tried just drinking, and I just can't get my head around it right now, and I think I'm going to try life. Like I get the drugs, and I get they took me down, but I've never just tried drinking, and I'm going to try that. And I didn't expect him to respond to that well, and he said, I totally get it, and that if you're an alcoholic, you'll be the last one to know, and that people in your life will try and tell you, and you won't want to hear them. So my advice to you is listen to the people in your life. And that was it. He never, I went on to get kicked out of college a couple of more times.
And then let me stop you right there, by the way. That's something, that's a little moment that you can use to somebody who you're talking to, because that is, I've never really heard it broken down like that. I've heard you mention it before. You'll be the last to know, but to be able to maybe pass that on, what your father said to you, to somebody that's trying to bargain with you, right? Because we all have alcoholics in our life, and sooner or later, as you know, they end up maybe being your children or whatever, and they're going to say stuff like that, right? Because that's what we do. But it's planting that
Pete,
seed.
I got to tell you, like, I, I think if I'm honest with myself, when my immediate reaction to that conversation was like, wow, that went better than I thought. And then 7 years later, my wife has my cheeks in both her hands and she's screaming at the top of her lungs, you're an effing alcoholic. And my mind was like, oh, this was what my dad was talking about.
Yeah.
And there was 7 years of abject failure and consequences and, good times along the way too. Made some great friends and, met a woman and got married, and like, wasn't all a total disaster, but it was a moment for me that created the moment of clarity for me later in life, when it was really time for me, when I had enough.
Yeah. And you were still young. So, but I want to move. So you have that conversation, you walk away from your dad and you're thinking, well, that's so alcoholic. I can totally relate. Like, man, that went well. And subconsciously, you don't even realize that, like that was kind of a moment.
Yeah, totally. Right. I was expecting to get cut off, and I didn't yet.
So you go back. So you go back
to later.
So your first year at Hotchkiss, by the way, that was, obviously you didn't go back there. Was there a lot of hard drugs in that year?
Yeah, I mean, for sure, it wasn't. I wasn't. Hard drugs in the '80s was blow.
Yeah.
We weren't really touching much. I knew a couple people doing acid. I got to tell you, the drug thing for me, there was moments in my life where there wasn't anything I didn't try, but deep down inside, I knew I had a control issue with this stuff, and I was a little wary of hard drugs. Like I said, it wasn't like I didn't do them, but I didn't. I knew I couldn't afford a coke habit.
Yeah.
And I hated chasing people with it. So that was the thing for me that was. It was very hard when it came time to quit alcohol, because my experience was I could put down drugs in a way that I couldn't put down alcohol. Now, I shifted to booze, but I woke up one day and just said, I do not like feeling paranoid and a loser and stupid the way I do when I'm stoned, and I'm not gonna smoke pot anymore. And it was never hard to say no. Like, I just never did it again, and frankly never had plenty of times where people offered it to me and was just comfortable saying no, thank you. I don't like how that makes me feel. And blow, similar thing, just like had enough experiences where I ran out and was knocking on bathroom doors, asking people to let me in so I could get some more, and that felt grunty and crappy, and I just didn't like going down there anymore. So I got to a place where people would offer it to me, and I could easily say no, thank you, because I could play the tape forward and I'd know what it'd be like in 6 hours, and I didn't want to start that process. And those dots never connected with booze.
Well, and it's like, it almost makes sense that you were pretty sincere when you were talking to your dad. It was this other stuff, and maybe because again, you're the last to know. You didn't know yet, so you go back up, what led you to Vermont?
I didn't get in anywhere else. And there was a girl that I went up and visited, had a great time, tried to play lacrosse but couldn't, because I frankly if you can't stay in school, you can't stay on an athletic.
But you were an athlete.
And I was, until I was your worst kind of athlete. I was a guy who walked around and acted like an athlete, but I actually ended up not having eligibility and all that stuff. The stuff that comes with making booze your number one priority.
Yeah.
But yeah, so I didn't go there to play lacrosse. I went there because it was a fun school and the drinking age was 18, and I got in, and I loved it. Like some of my best friends in life are still guys I met, 2 months into school, and I had an awesome time. I was there for, it took me 6 years to get a 4-year degree. I learned how to ski, and beautiful place and beautiful people, and I'd recommend that place to anybody. Honestly, loved it.
Yeah, so you were having a hell of a time.
Yeah, for sure.
Any consequences when you're up in Burlington?
Well, I mean, I literally got accepted into the school 4 times.
Well, what's that mean?
I don't know. I don't think they track that record, but the last time I was, writing letters and having personal meetings with the dean and the president. And I had a great comeback, man. I was, good first impression, great comeback, and it just, can never hold on.
Yeah.
and DUIs and I got a lot of stuff, a lot of consequences. But I would say major, right? And horrendous cum. And in the end, I was taking more credits than I needed, but I needed to get another, 3 credit A to get my cum up to a 2.0 so they could give me a piece of paper.
Yeah. It's so you finish up there, and then it's on to New York City, right? I mean, and what kind?
I met this woman, and we were, she's awesome, and we decided to move to New York together, and tried to make a career and kind of live together. I had separate apartments, but sort of ended up living together, and eventually got engaged and had a bunch of failure. Got fired from a bunch of jobs, and was in sales, but didn't work. That last, got married in 91, and that year, 1992, was a dark year for me. It was, I knew I had a problem, and I don't think what I had, what I never imagined, when boozing's fun, and maybe you're getting consequences, right? Maybe you get DUI, maybe a couple, black out and do some stuff you're embarrassed by. But I had some, I got to a place where I couldn't catch a buzz. I was chugging vodka in the middle of the night, waiting for a buzz that never came. And it's really depressing when you, when I was trying to convince myself I was okay. It's hard to be standing in a closet chugging a bottle of vodka with a voice that's trying to tell you that this isn't alcoholism.
Yeah, you're okay.
Yeah. This is, under what circumstances would this be okay?
And you're in a closet because you're married, and now there's somebody else in the picture. And I have to imagine pressure is building there. So you mentioned you go to that first meeting in 1985. Any meetings in between, and was that you're sober for a little while, you're going to meetings in Canada, but no more meetings after that?
Nope. Just 7 more years of getting after it, and not necessarily succeeding, maybe outwardly succeeding, like met a woman, got married. Awesome, greatest thing that ever happened in my life, and under circumstances, maybe the only good thing that was going on during then. And, graduated from college with a really sketchy track record through it. And so, had moments of sort of knuckling down and pulling together and feeling like I was going to figure life out. And made some good friends in New York and had a great time. And then just, I was the kind of guy that I'd go out with you on a Saturday and we'd go huge, and then I'd have another guy that I'd go out with on Sunday, and another guy I'd go out with on Monday. So you might not know that I was doing it every day of the week. I was just the guy going huge with you on a Saturday. And
it's easy to find those people in New York City.
Yeah, it's great, right?
Yeah.
And then on top of it, I was closeted, right? So I had this whole stash that I was embarrassed at the quantity that I was consuming, so I didn't let people see it.
So, you mentioned too, your wife. How did you are somebody who is a real good example of a healthy relationship and sobriety. But before the healthy relationship, there was the drinking. How did you pull that off? How did you not, separate or split up? Because I'm sure you were putting her through hell.
Yeah, I mean, she saw something in me that I couldn't see in myself, maybe. I mean, I think in many ways she sort of, we've obviously had conversations about it over the years. I think she didn't want to admit to herself how bad it was for me. I certainly hid it as best I could. I think there were moments with her that, I'll tell you a story. We had our 15-year wedding anniversary. So I got sober a year into our marriage. We had our 15-year wedding anniversary, and we went someplace nice. Can't remember where, but we were sitting on a beach someplace nice, and she looked at me and said, I hated our wedding day. And I was like, oh my God, really? Tell me about it. And she said, yeah, I felt like I was making a huge mistake. And I said to her, you should listen to that voice. That's a good voice. Like you absolutely, you rolled the dice. Like
yeah.
The likelihood, like the number of people that marry an active alcoholic that 15 years later,
you're sitting on a beach together. Yeah.
Sober, and you got it. Like that's very small. Like that voice that told you this might be a big mistake is a really healthy voice. And I'm glad you didn't listen to it, but next time you might want it. And then I shared with her, I hated our wedding day too. And she said, why? And I said, because all I was trying to do was not get hammered, and I couldn't do it.
And you're thinking about how can I control it, right? And it's so frustrating.
Yeah. Just like, that's what I remember about my wedding was like just this perpetual need to go and chug a beer and knowing that it wasn't appropriate not to do it.
We'll get back to this conversation in a second, but right now, a word from our sponsors. And we'll get to in a moment, to when you get sober and when things turn around. But while I got you here, talking about, your relationship with your wife, what are some of the things? I mean, you really speak to it when you say, I'm the luckiest guy in the world, like you got the deal of the century, right? I mean, and that's kind of I don't think that we're entitled. As an alcoholic, I'm entitled. And you say it, Clint, born on third base, thought you hit a triple. You said that about your life. I can see that in my life too. How do you find the gratitude with your, and I'm not saying you're perfect because we're not, but how do you find the gratitude in your relationship every day or try to?
Well, it starts from a place where I know I got the better end of the deal. We're just, I like Pete, we're lucky that there's people out there that will marry people like us.
Yeah.
My wife married an active alcoholic. We ruin the lives of the people that love us the most.
Yeah.
That's my natural propensity. And so when I'm in a good place and when our marriage is in a good place, that's where I'm coming from. I'm not caught up in like how you're making me feel today and God, if you would only do this, my life would be better, right? Like it's not like I don't have those moments and thoughts and voices, but when I come from a grounded place of like, this is a woman who would tell me that I was drunk and I would try and make her feel crazy.
Yeah.
And that's what I do when I'm drunk. And she stuck by me and she supported me. And it was, I was no winner, right? I was a guy with legal issues in multiple states and getting fired from jobs. And, it wasn't super clear to her that I was a great guy to hitch on to that was going to make her life better.
Yeah. Or who was going to turn it around.
Yeah. But she's awesome, right? She didn't, most people would have walked out. She didn't. And I'm incredibly grateful for that. And most days I can't believe it. I can't believe that, we've been married 30 years and the most important and best decision I made in my entire life, I did as an active alcoholic. And, statistically, that's unreal.
One thing you said.
She's a great mom and she's awesome. feel lucky.
One thing you mentioned about feelings, as alcoholics, for myself, I poured so much alcohol and other substances on every feeling I had for so long that even today, with a little bit of time, I still am so jammed up about. Sometimes, right? Again, like you said, when I'm coming from the right place, it's all the good stuff. And for a guy like you, from what I see, there's a lot of coming from the right place. For me, maybe not so much. And people get wrapped up, people being me in this case, about how others make us feel, how situations make us feel, and that's kind of that's alcoholic from your experience.
Yeah, totally. I mean, that was part of, we're getting into kind of the value of the program and what I learned through that. But, for me, I think you just summarized the core essence of alcoholism for me, which is, I chased feeling better, and in a way where, I would consciously mortgage my future for the next 15 minutes of fun. I didn't care. I'll figure it out later. I need to do this right now. And in sobriety, those same instincts are still there, right? Like when I'm doing something that feels great, my mind is like, how do I make this feel better? And when I'm in a bad spot, I don't like how I feel, I'm obsessed with feeling better. And what I've learned is that's really a really bad compass for life. Like I make really bad choices when I'm chasing feeling better. I can do it. I can have moments where I can have fun and do all that sort of stuff, and that's great, recreation and everything. But that can't be a core driver in life, right? I mean, you've heard me say it, like feelings of the weather.
Yeah, they change.
Can't control them. Can't control them, and they're gonna change.
And sometimes, in your experience, and they change kind of rather quickly. So it's really an unfortunate an unfortunate move to make a big decision based on how you're feeling at a certain time.
And in early sobriety, like, the volatility is unbelievable, right? I mean, I might be driving down the road feeling fine, and I take a left, and I feel like my life's gonna end.
Absolutely, yeah.
I remember a bill that I forgot about, and nothing has changed other than I remember about a bill that I forgot about, and it's like it ruined my day.
Yeah.
And I might even have money in the bank to pay it. It's crazy. I don't know if normal people have voices in their head to do that, but when I talk about it, in a meeting, I certainly get a lot of people who identify.
You get some feedback. Yeah.
Yeah. There's chatter that goes on all the time, and it impacts, how I feel. So I solve it with structure and routine and commitment to some stuff that, works, and it keeps me on the beam, right? It keeps me feeling grateful for the people that stuck with me when I wasn't a good partner to be with, and it keeps me balanced and realizing that, like, I'm the lucky one.
So what? Go ahead.
No.
So
what do you got?
I got plenty more. Hold on, I won't keep you forever. But you get sober. What happens? Is there a moment specifically where, you mentioned your wife's ended up holding your cheeks? It's 1993 or 92 was a terrible year. What leads up to you bottoming out?
Yeah, that was well. So, in that moment that I already described to you, that you just reiterated, I had two thoughts. So I had the thought that, oh my God, this is what my dad was thinking about. And then my next thought was, good, she's going to leave, and then I can drink the way I want to drink. And then right afterwards, I was horrified. I was horrified that that's actually what I thought, and that the idea of choosing alone with a room full of booze was more appealing than being there with this woman. I just knew I was sick, and so I gave her the reins, and and I did not go to inpatient rehab, but I went.
So you gave her the reins, and you said, hey, whatever you need me to do, I'll do it.
Yeah, like I just had that moment that we all need where we just say, yes, I give up. I'm going to stop like throwing the walls up and trying to convince you everything's fine and admitting that I can handle this by myself. I had, for the 4 or 5 or 6 months before, I tried all those things that are in our book that says we tried and failed in a way where I was willing to admit that I couldn't do it by myself.
And so what's her next move? What's your next move? What ends up happening?
So she made some phone calls, and I had rehab was an option, and somehow I talked my way out of it. I frankly, what I remember was,
you're still at it,
yeah. Well, I
Yeah.
had such a lack of confidence that I felt like I wanted to save rehab
for when it gets worse. Yeah.
Yeah, like I'm gonna keep that one in the bag in case I really need it, right? So I started going to meetings, and I committed to a 90 and 90, and that was not my last drink, but it was it started a process of full commitment of going to 12-step meetings and developing a community and my just enougher mentality is how I approached AA, and did not have a tremendous amount of success in it. Never gave up, but tried. I was on a mission to figure out how little I could do to quit drinking, and over the course of the next 2 years, I came to believe that wasn't really the goal. The goal is to do everything I can possibly do to find a good life. And I mean that sincerely. Like, it's too, you can lean on recovery, and listen, anybody that has what I have, if alcohol and drugs just stop ruining their lives, good for them, and I have no judgment on it. But there's this other thing out there, which is like, which on good days I'm in touch with, which is like a great life, like a life that is better than anything I thought I'd ever have. I didn't like myself. I learned how to shave in the shower without looking in a mirror because I didn't like looking at myself.
I mean, that's real. When you say that, that's real. That's not just some kind of cliche or something you throw out there. You really couldn't look in the mirror, because you hear people say that.
I couldn't. I still do it. I still shave in the shower without a mirror. It's just like one of the little hangovers from. And now I'm not winking at myself in the mirror, but I'm not avoiding it either, right?
Yeah. 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 Well, that's staying grounded. So you're one of the things too. New York is a wonderful place for people to get sober, especially I would think in the early 90s, because that 90 and 90 is right at your fingertips. There's actually,
you got no excuse, right?
Yeah.
There's a meeting. There's a clubhouse in every neighborhood that has a meeting every other hour. Starting at 5 a.m. and going till midnight.
What kind of meetings did you go to there?
I will tell you, I did not. We moved out of New York relatively quickly. The part of New York that baffled me about people who stay sober there is that there's so much social life around alcohol. You live if you're young, you live in a pretty small environment, and you're not having people over to your apartment. You're meeting in bars and restaurants, and it's not that you can't find other stuff. It's just getting out of the city in general. There's more social activity around and camaraderie that isn't alcohol focused.
Yeah. So you guys, you do your 90 and 90, and then when do you end up slipping up and drinking again?
So I drank a year into sobriety. That's November. So I first came in September of '92. Certainly had a couple of breakdowns and some drinks, and it wasn't continuous sobriety throughout that whole period. But it wasn't. I never went on a bender. And then a couple of different 30-day coins and that kind of stuff. And then November of '93, I went on a hunting trip in Vermont with some college buddies, and was kind of gutted it out the first night and drank the second night, and Dude, super, super grateful I did. I mean, at the time, I'm grateful I did now because it answered a question for me that was running into my head that whole first year, which is, do I have another good night in me? Never a question of whether I was an alcoholic, never a question of whether, long term I needed to stop drinking, but just what I flirted with and what I massaged was this idea that I could still have, I could sneak a good night in every once in a while, and it kind of freaked me out. It was that last night of drinking was no different than the second to last night of drinking, and it made me believe that this was physical. I was sure that being totally clean for over a year, I was going to catch a huge prize and it was going to be awesome, and that wasn't how it played out. And so came back and started the clock all over again, day one.
What do you tell people that come back in and out? Like you said, here you are, what, 28 years?
Yeah.
And you were sitting there with a couple of 30-day chips, several in your hand at one point, or you in your possession. What do you tell folks that are in and out?
So, I tell people, this is what I tell people. I say, imagine the person you love most in your life comes to you and says, I need help. I have a problem with drug and alcohol. What should I do? And take out a piece of paper and a pencil and write down absolutely everything you would tell that person to do. And, for the most people who actually do this, it's not a short list, right? There's the obvious stuff like go to a meeting, do a 90-90, get phone numbers, right? And then there's the granular stuff, which is, call a person before you go to the bar or before you go and cop, or, not just get a sponsor, but let them in and really get honest with somebody. Like, just trust somebody and let them hear all the crazy stuff. So you write all that stuff down, and then circle the stuff you're willing to do, and then do it. And then if it doesn't work, take out the piece of paper again and circle 2 more things and do it.
Yeah.
And eventually you get to, for me, I got to what is my program, right? So my program, you can do all 30 if you come up with 30 or 35 or whatever the number is. Like, do it all. You're definitely gonna work, and you're definitely gonna find a happy life. But my experience is it's the nature of who we are. With that nobody tries it that way. I think we all are trying to figure out,
what's the least amount? Yeah.
So I had this sponsor, and God, he's awesome, right? And he took me aside one day and he said, why don't you want to have a spiritual awakening? And you know what that means, right? There's the 12th step of the 12th step says, having had a spiritual awakening as a result of these steps. And what he was really saying to me is, you're not doing the work. And I don't understand why you're not doing the work, but I see that you're not doing the work. Why don't you want the end result of it? And he wanted an answer. I mean, he just sat there and didn't say anything and looked me in the eye, and he wanted me to answer it. And I answered him. I thought about it, and I answered him as honestly as I could at the time. And what I said to him was, it's not that I don't want to have a spiritual awakening. I just don't want to do what you did to get it.
Yeah, that sounds familiar.
I think that's a really common, I think that's, people who are early to this thing, that's a pretty common thing, right? We just, it's not that we don't want it. For me, it was a combination of not really believing it, not understanding how cool it was. I mean, when you finally, I got to a place where I liked who I was, and I liked my life, and it worked. And what I did to get there was, I beat myself up a lot. I took a lot of punches, and I tried the hard way a lot. And then I finally, ultimately, what started working for me was the stuff that half the stuff they tell you as a third grader, and I missed it then.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, and you can be too, quote unquote, too cool to get this thing. You're too cool to understand how cool it is almost, because you don't want to do the bullshit. And the more and more you compare yourself out, the more and more you're making yourself subject to, fatality nowadays, right? I mean, just going out there and dying. You stick around. How does your life start to change? What gears are you able to discover in sobriety?
Yeah, and you can absolutely overthink it, right? I overthought it. It's like the life and what I call my program, what I live today, is infinitely more simple than I thought it would be.
Yeah.
Even the whole higher power thing, I struggled with that whole concept. I didn't, I just didn't. I would think I was truly. Um, I just didn't understand. I didn't have a sense of it. I didn't deny it, but I really questioned it, and I really struggled with bad things happening to good people, and I didn't understand people that could believe in a God where bad things happen to good people, good things happen to bad people. I couldn't get a logic tree in where it all made sense for me, and I had I had this guy who there was one moment where I told him one day, when we start getting real honest with somebody, and I started telling him what was really going on in my head and some of the thoughts I had. And I said to him, I kind of feel like I have a voice in my head that tells me what the right thing to do is. And I rarely listen to it. And he just very casually said, like, how cool would that be if that voice was your higher power? I kind of, looked at him and I was like, what are you talking about? He said, well, why don't you just listen every time you hear that voice for the next 2 weeks? Why don't you do what it tells you to do and then get back to me? And, I ran into him like 10 days later. I was like, you got to be kidding me. Is this what this thing is? Like, my life got better instantly.
Yeah. But when the dust clears, the answer is inside us, right? I mean, when we rip that film off, yeah.
Yeah. Stop debating, stop justifying, the real simple stuff. Like, if it's got to be a secret, then it's not it. Right? Real simple filter.
Yeah, that's it, man. If it's got to be a secret, that is not it.
Yeah, right. Like, I just needed some real clear, like, and that was, for your average kid who went to Sunday school in third grade, like, they figured that out. I was, 28 years old and hadn't yet applied that to my life.
So when you do apply it, what kind of stuff starts to happen for you?
Well, that's the magic, right? The magic happens. Stuff happens that you can't even explain. Just life gets easy. Like, in a way that doesn't even make sense. Business gets easy, relationships get easier, just less tension, sleep better, like some instant, really pragmatic things that couldn't be, your logic tree doesn't have it related. It's just what we call the magic.
You said something. Go ahead.
Go ahead.
Well, you said something the other day about just how much your life has even changed, from being, 15 years ago, however many years you had then, to now. Just when you practice these principles, like the principles that we learn in 12 steps, right, in sobriety, when you're able, the answer is integrating them in all of the things you have. I like to decide, okay, my priority today is going to be work, and tomorrow, I'll get to a meeting. And it's all one, right? It's a spider web. It's all woven together. I think a lot of people, myself, I'm talking about really, you struggle with that, integrating sobriety into, because it's like, oh, I can't go to a meeting today. I've got work to handle. But really, if you go to the meeting, everything is going to take care of itself as far as work is concerned. You've experienced that.
Yeah, well, I get, and I don't want to come across like I'm really great at this, and I make plenty of mistakes, and I get plenty of regrets.
Yeah, we can always get your wife on if she.
Yeah, totally, right. And but I subscribe to this process that when I do, I have to own them and apologize for them, right? So that's the beauty of it. But so that spiritual awakening that guy challenged me to go get, that eventually motivated me to follow the directions that definitely leads to that, for me, was way more pragmatic than it was spiritual, right? It was just this idea that, I had all these things I wanted in my life, and I went about it by being a taker. And it turns out if you become a giver, I end up getting better than what I ever wanted, not doing it the way I tried to do it.
And you learn that, there's no way you learn that if you're not an alcoholic.
Yeah, and the what we subscribe to promotes being a giver, right? It promotes being there for other people and caring about other people and reaching out and all that kind of stuff. And as you see that working in the community we're in, it's not hard to try and apply it to work, or it's not hard to try and apply it to family. And which doesn't mean I got great relationships with everybody in extended family or anything like that. It's more about what am I trying to achieve, and what do I need to do, or am I trying to create a relationship with somebody in a way that they're never going to value it, reciprocate it. So maybe that's just somebody I'm not going to have a relationship with, and that's okay too.
What about you from 30,000 feet? Your life is looking out of this world. I'm not going to deny you any of the hardships you had in achieving things along the way, or just hardships because of mistakes. I mean, you mentioned it, nobody's perfect, but on paper, things are going swimmingly. And then, we mentioned Timmy, right? Your son. Timmy didn't wake up and decided he wanted to get into the recovery field, so he found his way there. And you were a big part of that. I mean,
that might be a whole separate podcast.
I know, but I have to touch on it. I mean, just as a guy, I was going to meetings around the Philadelphia area. Tim came back home. And the story, people can find it wherever they want. He gets caught up in this whole situation with drugs, dealing drugs with guys locally that he went to high school with. And it's one of these things where, because of the area it's in, this is my opinion, you can please stop me or interject or get it straight after I'm done. But because of the area that it's in, I mean, they took this story and it was like they injected it with steroids. And the next thing you know, you got these couple white collar kids who are on Good Morning America because they were selling weed. And the shit had hit the fan. And, oh, by the way, here's Dad, who is, decades sober. I mean, I guess the only blueprint for that is sobriety, but how do you handle that?
Well, I mean, there's first off, we just got a lot of help, and there's, for anybody who's never been in a crisis, one of the most amazing things is there's people that show up that carry you through. And, I'm not going to name them, but they know who they are. And some of them aren't ones you'd expect. Some of them are new people in our lives, and other people that you sort of count on. AA was there in a huge way, right? So you kind of expect that, and you know it. I leaned on it really heavily. So we didn't try and do it alone, and there were a lot of components to it. The biggest part that was, so very, very quickly in the process, I didn't know any of this stuff was going on, right? So my first step was like, I'm going to assume I can't really trust what he's going to tell me, given the fact that, he wouldn't be in this situation if he was being straightforward to start with. So I spent the first couple of days just trying to figure out, like, is this a guy in a business venture, or is this an addict who was being an idiot? And it pretty quickly became clear to me that it was the latter.
Yeah.
And that gave me singular focus, right? You outsourced the legal stuff. We had some folks help out with the media, but it was crazy, right?
I mean, there's cameras outside your house, dude.
And, yeah, totally. And then, and some of the stuff, you think back, Pete, and you're grateful for the little lessons that you try and give your children along the way. So, one of the things that I've told all my kids is that, we're the lucky ones. We're the lucky ones. Like, in a very real way. Like, you're a white male who's grown up in a really wealthy suburb with access to elite schools and vacations and country clubs, and nobody is ever going to feel sorry for you. And I mean it. And I don't mean they should. And it just, like, I'm a guy I've taken my kids to a slum in Kenya to expose them to, how millions and millions of people in this world really live, and just to try and get some sense of gratitude in their life and some clarity. It's hard. It's hard to, get kids not to be around in the areas that we go up, and be around access to wealth and comforts, and not to take them for granted and feel entitled to them. And it was one of the things that I learned too late in life. So one of the things that I had told my children, like, don't put a bullseye on your back, right? There's plenty of people out there that would love to see people like us go down, and don't ever give more. Like, our obligation in life, when you're given so much, is to give back and make the world a better place. And Timmy missed that memo, and he learned a really hard lesson, and he owned it, and now he lives that memo, right? And to me, it's unbelievable. I have no idea what the odds are for a kid in his situation to end up where he is now. But man, it's unbelievable. I'm so grateful.
It's amazing. I mean, it's amazing the work he does in sobriety. I got, we're all kind of connected in this great thing in sobriety. We're involved in it, and he's constantly talking to other guys. Hey, I got a kid I need you to sponsor. One of the kids in the house, and it's just he's keeping people involved by being involved, and it's a pretty awesome thing. You were so involved in recovery. Again, I was around that area at the time this shit hit the fan, and you walked it. You walked in those rooms. You'd got your hand up, and you would share, and you would talk about the circumstances you were in, which were ugly at the time, and how you felt, how you were scared, how you didn't know what was going to happen. Here was a guy who you never walked around like you had it all figured out, but you certainly hadn't hit a wall like this. But you were vulnerable. And then, I get to see you now on the other side of this, and you're as light as a feather. I mean, that I can't even imagine what an experience that would be like. But you walked through it in the rooms of recovery.
I mean, Pete, I can't even explain it. I just look at it sort of pragmatically. Like, there's 3 or 4 moments in my life where all I could see was darkness, and I couldn't imagine a pathway out where I'd have another good day. And I was wrong every time. And so now I just embrace that idea, right? Like, I just accept the fact that my head spins a bad scenario into a worse scenario, and can't see light at the end of the tunnel, and that doesn't necessarily mean that's how it's going to end. And hats off to Timmy for doing what he did. I don't people ask me all the time, right? So it was public, it was in the media, it's kind of, there's no anonymity or confidentiality as to what happened. And frankly, I'd rather tell people what really happened, because most of the stuff in the newspaper wasn't accurate. So I get parents reaching out, and I get kids reaching out, and, what did you do? How do you do it? And I literally say, like, listen, if we did 100 things, I would do all 100 again, because I don't really know which ones mattered. I don't. What I know is that it was really clear to me Timmy had an addiction problem. He had a legal problem, he had a media problem, he had an addiction problem. And the only thing I knew how to deal with was the addiction problem. And I knew I wasn't going to be the guy to do it, but I knew that there was a pathway. And
because with family and stuff like that, it's just, you did a great job by handing them off to guys you trusted in the program, and they kind of took the reins from there.
Yeah, well, I mean, it was obvious, right? If he listened to me, he wouldn't be where he was, so he wasn't going to listen to me. But so I'll give you one takeaway, and this is a big model that's in his Synergy houses right now. Is, I asked him as he got healthy and well, and we got really close because of just the nature of he got honest, and it brought us close together. And he needed help. But in retrospect, I've asked him, like, of all the things we do, what do you think what's something that really you think made a difference? So one of the things he said was, I connected him with people like you, right? Like you connected me with people that made sobriety look appealing. And guys like you and Pete and Scott, did what you do, right? And you take the phone call and you're like, yeah, I'll take him out to lunch and breakfast and talk to him. And Mike and, golfing and sit with him in a movie theater. And so that component of it has been something I've adopted since, which is very practically, like, I don't know that we always do people, the guy who comes in and he's on his third meeting and he's shaking and sweating and doesn't know what's up and wrong. And the advice we give him is, find somebody who has what you want and ask them to be your sponsor, right? So that's typical advice.
Mm.
Yeah, I don't know that we do that person the right service. I think what we could do is say, hey, let me find you a sponsor who I think would be a really good person for you, because that's the person that might change that guy's life might only show up. He might be 25 years sober and shows up at a 7 a.m. meeting in Rosemont that dude is never going to go to and meet that guy.
Yeah.
And you're in touch with guys in sober house. So I think that's part of the model, which is to say, hey, when there's people out there in our community that are willing to help and live it and happy to sponsor people and have their number on speed dial and answer the phone when somebody's struggling. And those of us that have been around can do a better job of connecting people.
Yeah, I mean,
not just letting it be the first person that comes up and hopes that they're the right person to change their life.
Yeah, almost like you would in business, in a sense. Just connect people that can help one another. Don't just your role doesn't end at find somebody that has what you want. And by the way, because we're kind of running out of time, so things end with Tim. I mean, they don't end, but here he is now. He went to college to Richmond to play lacrosse, gets bounced out of there because of injuries and whatever else. He ends up at home, faces trouble with the law, ends up going to prison, right?
Yeah.
For 7 months, 8 months.
Yeah, he went to county jail and did his time,
and then he comes out and he wins a championship, sober, many years.
Goes to college, plays lacrosse again, wins a freaking NCAA Division III championship. Learns a lot about himself and team camaraderie and leadership, and meets an unbelievable girl who was an angel in his life, who carried him through in the moments that he needed somebody to carry him through. Got married, just had a baby a month ago. Like, dude, it's crazy.
It's nuts, man. And there are times you
can't even believe it. But I will tell you one thing.
Yeah.
So we can say all that. At his sentencing hearing, I counted it up. There was 600 years of sobriety that showed up
at that meeting. I mean, at that hearing.
At his sentencing hearing.
Oh, wow.
I mean, it's like, and guys that were, I wasn't allowed. You can take an AA meeting to jail, but you've got to go through a qualification process.
Uh-huh.
And I wasn't able to meet the process because my son was in that jail.
Okay.
And guys that were in that showed up at that sentencing meeting, specifically went through and jumped through the rings of fire so they could go in and give them a bump at an AA meeting. Like, it's like it was unbelievable. Like, the community that showed up to support him and me, and there are no words.
Well, and it's and here he is giving back to it today. We're short on time. Do you have anything else, Clint? I mean, and what do you? I always ask this question too. What do you tell the person that's just trying to get a day?
I would say I've so been there, and I so get it. And if you're thinking about anything else, other than how to put your head on the pillow sober that night, you're thinking about the wrong thing. Just get a day. Just get a day. I got 90 days, literally, because every day I said, if I feel like this tomorrow, I'm definitely going to drink. And then I'd wake up and I'd feel the same way. And I'd say, if I feel like this again tomorrow, I'm definitely going to get a drink. Today is not the rest of your life. And you know, we all, you know, here's a great line that I use all the time, which is, you know, we all have this phrase when we're out there, and it's one day, right? Everything starts with one day. You know, one day I'm going to be a better husband. One day I'm going to be a better employer. One day I'm going to quit drinking. One day I'm not going to drink so much. One day I'm going to be a good dad. And if you take one day and you turn it around, it becomes day one. And that's all this is, right? Just make today day one. Just be day one today, and take all those things that I'm committed to do, that I really believe in that I do, but today doesn't feel like the right day to do it, and make today the day.
Day one. I love it. Clint, you're the man, dude.
All right, buddy.
I appreciate
doing.
Yeah, I appreciate your time, dude. Thanks for being. Excuse me.
Pete, listen, I am so glad you're back in my life. I really, truly am, and I love you tons. And watching, I just feel, you know, you're a great guy, and appreciate you a lot.
I love you, Clint. It's great to be on the ride with you, man. I appreciate it.
All right.
All right, brother. See ya. Thanks so much for listening to The Payoff with Pete. Once again, I'm Pete Souza. And of course, we are part of the Rogue Media Network. All kinds of good podcasts you can find at roguemedianetwork.com. And of course, you can find this podcast and all those other ones wherever you get your podcasts, iTunes, Spotify, other spots like that.
This has been a Rogue Media podcast.